England and France. These two kingdoms have historically either hated or loved each other. Most of the time hated, but what you gonna do? They have had quite a few wars, but let's just do the 100 Years' War. No, wait a second. We're not doing the 100 Years' War. We're doing a subcategory of it, because doesn't matter. Anyway, this was the first major segment of the 100 Years' War, called the Edwardian War. Edward III, King of England, son of Edward II, and Isabella of France, who was a daughter of some king of France. His name probably was Louis. These are some pretty old dudes, though, and Edward, the third one, not the second, had a valid claim for the French throne. From Edward's perspective, at least, pretty much everyone, including the church, said that Philip VI was the king of France. By the way, Philip VI is the king of France. So, that's important. But through some death of a relative, Edward III inherited the duchies of Aquitaine and Gascony, which meant that Edward was Philip's vassal, which, I thought that would make all of England their vassal. But so for a while, things were going alright between Philip and Edward, but then Philip seized Gascony and allied with Scotland, which, for anyone who has lived under a rock for the past 1,000 years, has pretty much always been the rival of England, other than France and Scotland. So when Edward got possession of a dude who was a criminal in France, and Philip demanded that they be handed over, Edward declined. Philip responded with confiscating Aquitaine, which meant Edward declared war. I know that was a lot of back and forth. Important thing is, they're now at war. But Edward didn't have enough money to be in a war, so he essentially said to anyone who would listen, please give me money, I'll pay you back tons more after the war, just please, money, give, now, please. But wait, you may ask, why on earth would they need so much money for a war? Basically, Edward was planning a massive invasion of France, so he was spending tons on either preparing for the invasion or paying money to Flanders to be his ally. No, not that Flanders. This Flanders. Also, Scotland was attacking him as well, so he had to defend there. War costs a lot of money. While Edward was doing that, Philip had been invading Gascony, which was English-controlled, but they were receiving basically no help from them since Edward was trying to invade the north, so they had to rely completely on supplies in Gascony to defend against the entire French army. They just basically barricaded everything that could be barricaded and prayed to the one true God. They did, however, somehow manage to get another dude to join them and conduct raids in France with like a city's worth of soldiers against all of France. France, I was rooting for you until now. Why are you doing so badly? At least they were doing better against England. They raided a ton of cities along the southern coast, capturing a few, but mainly raids. They started planning a massive raid of a bunch of English cities. Their first target was Sandwich, which is actually the origin of the word sandwich. Anyway, they went to Sandwich, but there were tons of dudes there ready to defend, so they just moved on to other targets, where they proceeded to raid quite a lot. When the English finally showed up, the French thought that there were way more than there actually were, so they decided to run back to France. However, this fleet that France had been using was almost entirely mercenaries, and when they went back to France, they all mutinied and went to Italy. So France ended up just not doing any more of the raids. Edward sent a bunch of dudes to go and attack one of France's allies, but it ended up just being a massive waste of time because they gave up after 2 weeks. And France raised their army to fight, but for some reason they didn't, instead just staying at a distance as England proceeded to destroy the countryside. Finally, however, Edward decided to go and fight Philip, and in the ensuing battle, what? They didn't fight? They kept on pillaging because Edward just decided to continue instead? Okay. Well, it happened again right after, and again they were about to fight, but then Edward decided not to fight, and instead go back to England. Why are they not fighting? That's the whole point of doing this war in the first place. France, don't follow them, fight them. Edward, stop deciding at the last moment to not fight. Sorry about that. Edward finally got an alliance with Flanders. How, you might ask? Well, he didn't give them any wool until they would join, and then he paid them to stay. This wasn't as interesting as I had hoped. You really messed this up, Dave. Gascony, still holding out somehow, had ran upon a stroke of luck, as two major noble families that supported France had gotten into a war with each other. They also had managed to convince another noble to join them. Philip decided that he had to launch another invasion of England for some reason. This isn't a raid though, I didn't lie. It's not a raid, it's just an invasion. He gathered 400 ships and launched them for England. He want some of the finest salts and wines the world has ever seen? I'm a merchant, by the way. Wow, bro, that's a lot of salt and wine. How'd you get all this to England? My boat. How else would I have gotten this to a literal island? Well, I don't know, maybe you bought an airplane or something. Hello, I'm Edward III. Wait, is that our king? Yeah. Oh, sir, I have the finest salts and wines this world will ever see. You must buy them. I'm actually in need of some things, Oh, then may I show you to our catalog of the most Oh no, not for the salts or wine. I'm afraid that's all I have for sale. Well, I heard you had a ship. But sir, that's how I make my livelihood. I couldn't possibly sell it. I wasn't thinking of buying it, really. I kinda just wanted to, you know, get it for free. Why, sir? By force. Shit. Edward took a bunch of merchant ships and filled them to the brim with soldiers. Since the French had so many ships, they could barely move, and Edward used a strategy of using 2 boats full of archers to kill everyone on deck, and then using soldiers to kill everyone else. This strategy was incredibly effective, and almost the entire French fleet was destroyed. Philip started trying to invade one of England's allies, but after he realized that his entire fleet just got epically trollololololed and was gone, decided to instead take on a more defensive front. Edward took advantage of the weakened France to invade. He split his armies in 2 so he could siege multiple places at once, but Philip managed to engage one of the armies before the other could help. He managed to win the battle and moved on to the next. They again were about to fight, but then Philip and Edward negotiated a truce, since they were both broke. After a bit of peace, where both sides could quickly take control of political matters and get a second to get some money, they were doing significantly better. In Brittany, which is here, not here, even though they sound really similar, they're not actually the same. Actually, why is it called Brittany? Huh, okay, so apparently right around when Rome fell, a bunch of the people in Britain, called the Britons, moved to Brittany. So people started calling it that since the Britons were also there. Huh. Yeah, anyway, that was really off topic. Where were we? Oh yeah, in Brittany, the king died, and there was a succession dispute over who should inherit. The king's father's child's child, siblings, uncles, nieces, siblings, brother-in-law. Or the king's half-brother. His name was John. John took control and seized a bunch of Brittany. The clergy in France didn't like this since they both wanted the other person to inherit. Because France was looking more like it would intervene, John called on Edward for help, which he provided, violating the truce. Philip showed up with a pretty large army, and he besieged John's capital. But then Edward showed up with his pretty big army, and they were finally, for the first time in the war, having a battle between Philip and Edward, until 2 random-ass cardinals showed up and got them to negotiate a truce. Yet another reason why I hate the historical papacy. The cardinals negotiated a truce that lasted 5 years. You see, Edward was getting hungry for more land, so he invaded Normandy. After a bit of Edward going around and burning down villages, Philip raised a massive army, even by Edward's standards. And at some point, they actually managed to have a battle! Anyway, Edward's army was on the defensive, just using archers to absolutely decimate most of Philip's army. Edward also won a key battle in Scotland, and captured their king. They didn't do much after that. Hello, and welcome to Dates of Things That Happened in History. Today, we have 2 players, John Jim and Don Slim. Now, first question. What happened in Europe in the year 1346? I don't know. Another pope showed up and told Edward to stop, please. No, you're stupid. Oh, that one thing showed up. You know, the thingy. Yes. The ow ow I'm dead thing. You know, that made the Grim Reaper. You have to have the actual name, sir. Oh, well in that case, cold. Final answer. Well, you are all idiots. The correct answer was the Black Death. Because everyone who interacted with another person died of throwing up their lungs, the war basically was on pause for a while. After the Black Death calmed down a bit, Edward's son started attacks on Brittany again. At some point around here, Philip died and was replaced with a guy named John. Different John, though. He was doing good until an army led by John showed up. They had a battle, and at first, Edward Jr. was winning, but he ran out of arrows, which were important. John started to win, but then Edward Jr. led a sneaky flank and managed to actually capture John himself. John was kept in house arrest until he managed to ransom himself. They ended the war with Edward gaining obscene amounts of land on the mainland, and John getting ransom for 2 million. Old people money. Wait! Huh? I'm worth way more than 2 million. Double it. Dude, that's not a smart idea. I'm worth more than that. Okay. So France had to pay 4 million old bucks, but since John didn't have that much after a war, he gave them a bunch of valuable prisoners, like his son, a couple of nobles, and a few other people, ransoming each individually. At some point, his son escaped and went back to France, so John decided, well, guess I should go back to England now. Au revoir, and died in England. Never have I heard of someone that chivalrous. Anyway, a few more things happened, but they aren't too interesting, so I'm just gonna end it here. Thanks for watching, and leave a comment on a war you want me to do, if you want.